Makers Live on LinkedIn is a space for everyone where we can come together to shatter convention, get deeper into how leaders are made, increase women's media influence, improve our health physically and mentally, ignite corporate responsibility, and inform our advocacy. We're here to make a statement, all in service of an equitable future in the workplace and beyond. Tune in from wherever you are. It's time for Makers Live on LinkedIn.
Makers is all about building a better world for the future, and so we thought we would bring the future to you.
Conversations are about Gen Z without Gen Z being present. And I think the same is true for when we talk about women's issues, that oftentimes people, policymakers, and institutions are making decisions on our behalf without actually listening to women's opinions or the things that actually bother us or the things that keep us up at night.
I'd urge all of you to take the chance on the youth and realize that we have a lot of value and a lot of unique insight that we could be bringing.
Future generations feel empowered with themselves in the sense that they have the knowledge to know this is how I can access contraceptives and this is how I can keep myself safe.
It's so important for young girls to know more about their bodies.
If more girls were exposed to conferences like this, it could really help us form our own beliefs and understand what our voice is.
The message I want to leave you all with is just not to forget about the next generation. We are making change and paving the way in our own right. Empowered women, empower girls.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day today. My name is Olivia Frary, and I'm super excited to be kicking us off here with Makers. Thank you so much for having me. I am currently an executive with UTA Next Gen. We are a group that was recently acquired by the incredible folks at United Talent Agency, but formerly I was leading community and partnerships at Juve Consulting, a Gen Z marketing agency helping brands connect with diverse young audiences. And I'm currently also the head of ZCon, which is the first ever conference with all Gen Z speakers. That's happening next week in New York. But I will push to Chelsea. Thank you so much for having me. And here's Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Miller. I am one of the co-founders of Freedom March NYC. We are one of the largest youth-led civil rights organizations in the country. I am, of course, based in New York City and have had the incredible privilege of working with Makers over the past 2 years, attending different events, speaking at different events, partnering in the media space. And so it is only fitting to be here today with you all and can't wait for the conversation. And so I'm pushing it over to Madi.
Hi, everyone. Chelsea, Olivia, and everyone watching. Hope your day is off to a great start. I'm Madi Nguyen-Acosta, better known as Madi, and I'm also based in New York City. I am a manager of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Sony Music Group. And in my role, I manage Sony Music Group's global employee resource groups, better known as ERGs, lead our SMG Impact Fellows program, and support the overall expansion of DEI initiatives and programming at the company. It's also super exciting to be here with Makers. Sony Music Group has been a proud partner for quite some time now, and it's awesome supporting their work from afar. But I also have a journalism and PR background, so it's the storytelling for me. And I'm super grateful to be here with all of you. This roundtable is really important to amplify the voices of young women in our generation and think about how we can connect and support each other as we make change. So to kick things off for us, I'll start with a question for you two. As a young person at work in a corporate space, and I'm experiencing work culture a little bit differently than my colleagues in previous generations. Workplaces are more flexible, employees are more purpose-driven, and there's an emphasis on work-life balance, which I know us Gen Z, we know how to maintain that. How have you created or supported an inclusive work culture that welcomes young people and embraces new talents and strengths?
Well, I love this question, especially because it's something that I'm currently sort of grappling with for the first time in my career, working at a larger agency and, bigger company overall. My background is one that, really started off driving student-led groups and community-led groups, right? And, really wanting to collaborate with smaller groups to create impact and change. And obviously that was true when my team and I were Juve Consulting, right? We were a very much smaller company than we are now at UTA. And obviously this is something that affects a lot of different companies and businesses differently. But I think that the, best way to support and create that type of inclusive work culture, regardless of the size or shape or different aspects of teams that you're working on, is obviously really just encouraging folks to speak up and show up to work as their true selves. That includes, if folks are having struggles, creating safe spaces to make sure that folks feel heard and can express themselves, whether that's different aspects of their identity, right, or struggles that might be happening outside of the workplace, right? And just being open and honest about those types of things, because everyone's going through it. Everyone is a human and everyone's experiencing the world and, the multitude of things that are happening around us as we're working and as we're trying to, hit all our goals and targets and create change in ways that are either big or small or anything in between. And so obviously being fully human is something that's hard. But if we can all encourage each other to do that, then everything will be a better place for it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I say is when you are at a table to be mindful of who is not present at that table. And I think that it's really important when we're thinking about especially a generation that is exposed to so much because of social media and because of technology, that we have responsibility to create environments that are reflective of the world that we live in. And so that means, right, different ages, different ideas, different strengths and weaknesses, right? One of the things that my friends and I talk about a lot is left brain versus right brain, right? Folks who are very analytical versus folks who are very creative, and creating spaces where everyone can feel comfortable leading as well as growing in. And so when I think about Freedom March, we were birthed as an organization that was designed to disrupt. And so when I think about the spaces that we go in and the team that we built and the folks that we support, it really is in the space of how do we make sure that we are reflecting the world that we want to live in. Then I would also say that I feel like demographics are changing. Gen Z is taking up space in so many different ways and is showing up to disrupt in the workforce. And so even as we're thinking about the future of work, we have to be mindful that in order for organizations and companies and entities to exist within the next 10, 20 years, there has to also be that curve of understanding what that world will look like. And the reality is that you will leave your workforce and you will leave your company behind if you do not take into consideration what the future looks like.
Yeah, those are great answers. And what I'm hearing from the both of you, like a silver lining or similarity, is we're all leading by example too. And I think that's something that older generations really look to Gen Z for. We not only talk the talk, but we walk the walk in terms of what we want to see for the future of the workforce. So kudos to you both for the amazing work that you all are doing in that space.
Yeah, and I will just reiterate, this is something that I'm like actively learning more and more about every day, right? It's, month 8 of coming into an office that is, a much more structured and, set up, systematized place than the startup kind of culture and youth organizing culture that, Juve Consulting had previously. And I think our team has learned so much from that transition. And honestly, the folks at UTA have also been just incredibly transparent and open and honest and willing to learn from us as well. And so I definitely agree that it's about leading by example and making it a two-way street so that everyone in different offices that are coming from different experiences can learn from each other. Totally agree. Cool. Is there anything else, Madi, that you want to share from your experience at Sony before we hop to the next question?
Ooh, great question. Something that resonates with me or like comes to mind as I'm hearing you both respond is My senior leader says something that she doesn't believe in role models, but real models. And I think that
I love that.
is something that our team, as the Office of DE&I, that's what we believe in, how we show up in the workplace. And the Office of DE&I at Sony Music is also small and mighty, but also emerged in the last 3 years after the murder of George Floyd. So a lot of the work that we're doing is groundbreaking, foundational, but also very new to the music industry. So I think at times when people are receiving news about DEI or hearing about the wonderful things that we're doing, it can also feel a bit scary to them. So that notion of real modeling instead of role modeling, I just keep that to heart in everything that I do, because I think once you model that safe space and model what inclusion looks like, model what allyship looks like, it can really go a long way. So that's my message and outlook to paving the way for the future of our workforce.
Awesome. 100% agree. So I'll take us to the next question, which I'm very excited about because I love this question. It feels like, honestly, something that I have asked a lot of my mentors, right? And always love hearing folks' answers. So I'm very excited to hear your reactions to this one. If you could go back and give your younger self advice on your career, what would you tell that little girl? Or what would you say to a young girl who wanted to have your current job one day?
I can kick us off.
Perfect.
I want to answer this question with a little short story, or to share more about myself. I grew up an only child, but my village raised me. And my mom was also a single mom. So I have vivid memories being dropped off to my auntie's house to hang out with my cousins while my mom went to work her second job. And play dates with schoolmates was a regular for me. And being an only child, I observed the dynamics that my cousins or my friends had with their families, and really how those families navigated the world, since it was so different to what my life looked like. In retrospect, I think that exposure and observation really helped me get to where I am today, because I was taking notes on how whole families were raising their children, or like, oh, how come I don't have that? But maybe that's something that I can bring back in my household. Just taking little mindful notes of what that looked like. And I say that to say, if I wasn't surrounded by family, I was also alone and getting comfortable being independent. So I had the best of both worlds of, just like figuring things out by myself, being self-taught. And because of how observant I was, there were so many things that I also didn't know the answers to. And I think a lot of first and second gen viewers could probably resonate with this. We had to figure stuff out for ourselves all the time. And in particular for immigrant families as well. So if I could go back in time and look at little Maddie and how she was figuring things out, I'd want to empower her a little bit more. Something that I saw recently too is Victoria Monet, one of my favorite music artists, also a Sony Music artist. Just her videos with her daughter, Hazel, and how she speaks affirmations to her daughter. I'm like, wow, I wish I had that. And I wish that I was more empowered. And that's not to blame the people around me at all, but having that foundation of like, affirmations constantly in my ear and hearing those types of words of empowerment consistently would have meant a lot for me, especially in times where I couldn't figure things out myself, or especially I would say when greatness was expected of me. And there's a statistic out there that says something like high performing women receive 30-something% of more problematic feedback compared to everyone else. And there's times where that 38 or 30 whatever feels like more than the other half. So placing more emphasis on empowerment and empowering my younger self, affirming her, telling her that she's great, telling her you have a gift. There's no one else with that gift. Only you can do it the way that you do. That would have gone a long way for me, especially because now in adulthood, I sometimes still find myself struggling with self-confidence, and I just wonder who I would be if it started from the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think that for me, when I just look back, I think to the early stages of my career, I think I similarly was in a stage of, I don't even know if it's necessarily imposter syndrome, because I think it's more so like what the external world tries to tell you you are, and battling that perhaps internally with who you know you are and trying to figure out how to navigate those spaces. And so I think that I would just tell my younger self to continue, right, to be unapologetic. There were a lot of risks that I made in my career. And it's funny because even when I say career, I don't really consider the work that I do now to be work or a career. I see it as just purpose aligned work, traveling the world, being able to do public speaking, being able to organize and mobilize across movements. And so for me, it's more so just taking the unconventional path and not being afraid of that. I think that's also a really big thing. I think that sometimes I'm also first generation American, Maddie, so definitely get it with this idea of, the fear of failure or the fear of not being able to achieve the things that are expected of you. And, when I was growing up, especially in a Caribbean household, the thing is like a lawyer or a doctor. And I obviously am neither one of those things. And so I think I would definitely tell my younger self to just not be afraid to take those risks. And then similarly, when I think about the younger girls who are coming up and are interested in pathways and social impact and in social change work, I think my biggest advice is to really be clear on your voice and your vision, because as we all know, this work can be incredibly exhausting when you're talking about civil rights, when you're talking about women's advocacy, when you are talking about equity in any space. There's just so many challenges that come with that, especially being a woman existing in things that have historically been dominated by men. And so I think that it's also really important to just be intentional about finding your voice and finding your tribe. And I would say that, at least for me, a lot of the doors that have been opened and opportunities that have come along the way throughout my career and the years that I've done this work has come from the women who have opened so many doors before I even got in the room. And so don't be afraid to say those names and give those people their flowers. I was actually doing a podcast interview a few days ago, and they asked me, you're someone who is stylish, but you also are a civil rights organizer. How has your experience been navigating those sorts of things of being, in fashion and doing campaigns with Versace, but also, being very prominent in the civil rights space? And my answer was, that battle was already fought for me. And so I don't feel the need to take on things that previous generations have already stamped, made it clear, have said that, Black women and girls deserve to live lives unapologetically. And so I'm not here to shrink myself because my ancestors already did that work. And so my job is to stand on that. And so I think that my advice to younger generations is, don't feel like you have to refight the battles. Stand on your truth and your power and who you are and what other generations already fought for you to exist in. And so, that would be my advice.
I'm absolutely just so inspired by both of you, truly. And that is so powerful, Chelsea. You need to stop putting the word career in quotations, though. You're absolutely not allowed to do that. But yeah, and I love, honestly, that everyone on this panel is first gen. And I feel like that's worth calling out. We love Batty immigrant daughters, for sure. My mom is from Sweden. My dad's from Mexico. And I feel like that honestly speaks to so much of this conversation around the new era of girlhood, right? Because I think a lot of women and girls around the world are struggling or just kind of grappling with what it's like to have to stand in multiple identities at once, right? And feel like you have to take on multiple roles at once, right? And how can you try your hardest to be your best self and show up in all the ways that folks want you to show up, right? While still also being true to yourself and being true to those identities. So yeah, thank you so much for answering that, you guys. I'm so inspired by both of you.
Of course. If I can just build on what you mentioned too, I feel like the other battle that we deal with is not putting ourselves in boxes too. Mm-hmm. There's so many expectations set for women through society and doing the work within our inner selves to say, like, I don't have to fit that box. I don't have to fit that standard. You can be stylish and be an advocate at the same time. Like, who said we can't do one or the other? So I think it takes a lot of strength to move through that, especially when, like you said, Chelsea, like it's never been done in our families. So we have to do it for ourselves. So I really love what you both had to share right there.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, we can move on, I think, to the third question. And so, what is a positive change that you've advocated for in your personal or professional life that showed you the power of your voice and story? And so, I love this question because I always talk about the importance of storytelling. It's so critical to the work that I do with Freedom March NYC and even with the work that I do with CPM Global, where we do media and storytelling with some of our incredible partners. And so I have a lot of thoughts on this. I can definitely take it and then we can just popcorn it around.
Perfect.
But when I think of at least a positive change that I've advocated for, I would say setting boundaries. And I really want to talk about this, especially because this is a conversation for, the new era of girlhood. And I think that it's so funny because we see so many jokes about like Gen Z in the workplace and the way that I think we have been very clearly setting our boundaries. But for me, I think both like personally and professionally, right? I think that we oftentimes feel incredibly stretched. And like you said, Olivia, we are all first gen on this call. So I'm sure we can all relate to this, of feeling like we have to be so many things at once. And so I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in recent years, because this is not something I've always practiced, is the importance of being very clear and intentional about your time and your capacity. We know that burnout is real. We know that mental health is real. We know that all of these things that we take on ultimately do takes a toll on us. And so what I have found that has been sustainable to my work and at least my voice and the story that I'm consistently building, because I think that my story is still being written, is to just be intentional about how you show up in the world and how you allow others to stretch you in the process.
I'll gladly jump in here next. I so passionately agree with what you said, Chelsea. And I think a lot of the conversation about Gen Z in the workforce, right, is like oftentimes, yes, centered around diverse young employees, right? And it's centered around frustration, right, of like new expectations that Gen Zers are bringing into the workforce, right? Or, ideas that young people are thinking like, why can't it be this way, right? And not afraid to think outside of the box. But I will say one positive change that I've advocated for that comes to mind, honestly, when I hear this question is like, my For You page is constantly flooded with that type of content of like how to advocate for yourself, how to set boundaries, how to build a career, personal brand, right? And I love that conversation. But the best thing that has come out of that for me is when I actually started having some of those conversations with my mom. And she was able to actually advocate for herself and got a raise at her job based on a lot of the conversations that we were having and kind of translating some of my ideas of, a lot of the quote unquote like Gen Z in the workforce ideas, right? About boundaries, about, your worth, about the value that you bring to the table for an employer, right? And seeing the change that made for her. Obviously, my mom's not Gen Z, but I am. And I was really excited to, empower her after so many years of her empowering me. And really inspiring me, right? She's such a powerful force and so passionate about her job and does so much in the arts and education world, which is just incredible in my opinion. But seeing some of those ideas and, tips and tricks that are shared in more of the Gen Z in the workforce type of conversation, right, make a difference for her was one of the most just personally powerful things that I saw come to fruition that wasn't just benefiting Gen Z, but benefiting folks of all generations when she was able to feel empowered, stand up for herself, and really showcase her value.
Yeah, and I think that's like just a really great point, Olivia, just for the sake that I feel like a lot of times we feel, and I don't know, maybe this is just me, but like sometimes I feel like we are speaking different languages from our parents and just like folks who sometimes don't necessarily get it. And especially I'm thinking about growing up in a Jamaican household where like things like mental health weren't really discussed very much, right? Things like I'm having a self-care day because I'm tired, and like my self-care day literally is 24 hours of doing nothing. It's like, oh, why are you in bed all day? Because this is self-care, and
so real, and so needed.
Like I promise I will be fine tomorrow. Like this is just a part of my rest. There's nothing wrong with me.
100%.
No, you don't need to like check in on me and see if I'm fine. Like this is a part of my, this is my health and wellness. And so I think to that point, learning how to bridge that gap, and it could feel frustrating when you feel like your peers get it, but it's not always being translated to the people that you love the most, which is your family. And so being able to do that is so important. And so, yeah, I love that story.
I also think your moment, Olivia, is like a beautiful way to like give your mom her flowers because of the sacrifices that she did for you and your family, which I'm sure we all resonate with too. And like you said earlier, Chelsea, giving the generations past their flowers and their honors is something I'm also super passionate about. And I actually learned that through dance. So when I heard this question about advocating for change, I thought about it in my personal life. And outside of work, I'm a Polynesian dancer. I started dancing hula and Tahitian at the age of 7. And I went to dance on professionally when I turned 16, and then I also started teaching as well. If you're unfamiliar with Polynesian dance or somewhat new to it, there's many different kinds. And so when I learned, I danced in a traditional hula halau. Halau means hula school. And that just means that I was trained in the traditional way. So it's not recreational dancing like, oh, I just signed up for a hula class at the Y or something like that. This is like real stuff. But through dance, I learned the history and the culture of Polynesian people. And one of the issues that I advocate most for is within that community is for Mauna Kea. And Mauna Kea is Hawaii Island's tallest standing mountain. It's an active volcano, and its height and elevation attract a lot of scientists. And there's an ongoing battle right now with scientists and these people who want to build the 30-meter telescope, or TMT for short. This is a problem, a big problem to the indigenous people there, because the Mauna is their sacred place. And there's already multiple telescopes up there, and to put more on top of that sacred place and taking land away from the native people who live there is just a big no-no. So because dance has fueled me in my life, it's been my passion outside of work, my go-to, my getaway, it only feels right that I give it back because it's not my culture. I'm Filipino and Vietnamese, but embracing Polynesian culture has been a big part of who I am. So with any moment I get, I'm gonna use my platform and amplify the voices of Native and Indigenous people, particularly Polynesian people, because of the art that they shared with me. So I say all that to say too, that we just acknowledged Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday. And so my protection and advocacy for the Mauna and other sacred Indigenous places around the world would be non-existent if it wasn't for dance for me. Here in New York City, I've also helped out the Polynesian community people. I've also helped out the Polynesian community out here through Heva Pacifica, which is New York City's first ever Polynesian Cultural Arts Festival. And I continue to dance today because it's my also favorite form of storytelling. So that advocacy, dance not just brings me joy, but the art of it has shown me the power of movement, the power of using my body to express and convey certain emotions, the power of culture and ceremony. All of that, dance has showed me the power of storytelling through our bodies and to tell the stories of generations who have come before us and brought us everything that we know today. So that's my little answer there.
I'm obsessed with that. And I just have to say, before we move to the next question, we need to talk after this because I also grew up a dancer. So I think maybe we all have more in common than we even know. And I love that.
Okay, so we are moving on to the next question, which is an audience question. Exciting. So the question that we have is, what has been the single most impactful moment of your career so far?
Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. Mine's easy, and I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not even going to pretend to think about it. I will gladly plug ZCon in here. ZCon is the first ever conference with all Gen Z speakers that Chelsea spoke at last year, and we are so proud to be partnering with Yahoo on it this year as well. It is happening next week in New York at the Refinery, and for anyone watching this, we'd love to see if you can make it and extend an invite specifically to the makers community. And given that Yahoo is a partner, would love to do that. But I am just so incredibly humbled seeing all of the enthusiasm around ZCon, hearing the incredible magic that happens when you give Gen Z the mic, right? And you pass diverse young voices the mic to tell their stories and share their experiences, rather than, a lot of other industry conferences and spaces where we constantly are hearing from the top, right? And changing up who those speakers are and who the people are who are empowered to share their stories. Is just really honestly powerful for me overall, and being part of that has been incredible. So that is what I'll say. Quick ZCon plug, shameless ZCon plug, but absolutely check it out if you're not familiar, and so grateful to anyone who's already part of that community.
And ZCon is incredible. Everyone should come. I am co-signing that.
Wait, can I?
Okay, single most impactful moment. I'll answer this one as well. This is tough, but I will say definitely birthing Freedom March NYC. And I say that it was a birthing process because if you know anything about the front lines in 2020, then you understand. And so I think being able to still be here as an organization that was birthed and created out of something that was such a historical moment, and still being able to do that work and build community. And so I would say that I feel like we are existing in the most impactful moment, as we know a lot of organizations from the civil rights movement, a lot of organizations, especially youth-led organizations in the civic space, don't oftentimes last beyond 3 years, beyond 4 years, beyond 5 years, because of everything from funding to how movements oftentimes can implode depending on how they're organized and designed and the leaders of those spaces. And so to still have the same people who we started with being a part of that journey and doing the work with us, and as our community continues to expand, and we are actually working on something right now, a national initiative with Freedom March NYC that I can't say much about because it hasn't been released yet, but we'll be doing a lot more work around gun violence prevention and how civic can be a tool within Black and Brown communities to help young people essentially find their voices and know how to use their voices, elevate their voices, and be a part of so much of what we're seeing within the movement right now. And so, a lot of exciting work that's coming.
That's awesome. For me, the single most impactful moment would probably be getting accepted to the internship program that brought me my job. So I applied to the 4A's Foundation Multicultural Advertising Internship Program, MAPE for short. And if you know of MAPE or of a MAPE alum, holla in the chat. Without that community and without that program, I would not have landed my internship at Sony Music. That internship would have landed full time. I wouldn't be here doing the most impactful work that I've ever done, ever. So that was definitely the catalyst to my career that I'm going to also say my story's still being written. Thank you, Chelsea.
We love it. Okay, so we have the second question of Let's see. What's a book you've read or piece of media you've watched recently that inspired you? So I will take this one very quickly because I'm so excited about this. So I actually recently executive produced a docuseries where we traveled across 4
How
different
are we
cities.
supposed to follow this, Chelsea? I'm sorry. How are we supposed to follow this?
True. This happened. It's exciting. This is my shameless plug. I mean, you plug ZCon, so I mean, we're
So fair, so fair. No. Call me out. I love that. But I'm just saying, just as a preface, I cannot follow this whatsoever. But keep going.
You can. But anyway, okay. So anyways, Olivia already knows about the docuseries, guys. But it's a docuseries called Sounds of Change, the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer, where we interviewed some of the last living civil rights veterans of the movement from Freedom Summer 1964. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Freedom Summer 1964, it's when young people, specifically college students, partnered with local leaders in Mississippi to help challenge segregation and register Black voters in Mississippi, which at the time, less than 7% of the Black population in Mississippi were registered to vote. And by 1967, that increased to over 60%. And so we tell the story of the young people who were killed during that time. We tell the story of the young people who organized at that time. And so it was just an incredible docuseries. We shot it in LA, New York, DC, and Virginia, and managed to work on essentially getting the voices on record and some of the last living stories and interviews of the survivors who, of course, as we approach the 70th anniversary, we don't know how many of them will still be here. And so it'll be used for national archival purposes. And we also have a digital campaign where we work with our partners like Feminist Media and DoSomething.org and Common Era On. And so that is definitely something that was just an incredible moment for me of being able to work on, because I always talk about the generation that has come before us, and to be able to actually hear their stories and not just like read about it in textbooks, but like them telling us, and imparting that wisdom was incredible for me. And so, yeah, that is recent media and it's still happening. And so I'm in it because we are finalizing part 2 this week. Yeah, so whoever wants to go.
I can't wait to see that. For me, it's not a piece of media. I'm gonna say it's pieces combined on LinkedIn and TikTok. Something that inspired me is one, all the girlies who are getting ready for this like fall arc where we're all going to put our heads down in Q3 so that by the time January hits, we're all ready and we've already met our goals. So just hearing all the girls get motivated, they are motivating me. And then on LinkedIn, on the more serious front related to that note, I saw someone talk about how they're entering their season of no. And that really inspired me too, because I have goals that I'm trying to meet. And I've noticed that I like to say yes to a lot of things. And that has served me very, very well up until now. But I think it's time that I focus a little bit more on myself and say no, the power of no, getting comfortable with saying no. So I am striving to do that for myself in the next couple of months.
That is incredible. And I think both of those are things we can all learn from. I have nothing to add to this conversation. Like I said earlier, I cannot follow either of those. And honestly, recently, all I've been consuming is my emails anyways. So that's no fun for this audience. But I would love to know, how can the audience support you and your work? For both of you. For me, I think just check out ZCon. That is my one ask to this group and anyone watching. But yeah, Chelsea and Madi, how can the audience support you in your work?
So I would say just staying up to date with what's happening with Freedom March NYC. Again, we do have a huge announcement that's coming out by the end of this year that we're really excited about. And then I would say the best way to support any organization right now that is in the civic space is to get out to vote. Oh, and also tune into the docuseries that'll be launching in a few days for part 2 for Sounds of Change, the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer.
For me, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super passionate about mentorship and often use my platform to amplify resources that help Gen Z and other rising talent enter our creative industries. So like programs I mentioned earlier, like 4A's Made Foundation, Add Color Futures, and so much more, just to name a few, are things that got me to where I am today. And my intention is to continue to light the path that was once lit for me. I'm always open to connecting with folks in these creative industries. So if there's any fun projects that you'd like to work on together, please come my way. I'd love to work with you.
Incredible. Well, I'm so excited to stay connected with both of you lovely ladies. And I so appreciate all of the comments in the chat too. So thank you everyone for watching, for being part of this incredible makers community of women, girls, non-binary folks who are excited to make change and have more and more of these types of conversations. And maybe I'll see some of you at ZCon, but thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you later. Let's stay connected. Bye.